A lot of people praise Sticker Star for having great bosses. Honestly, I gotta disagree. I think that these bosses on average are okay at best and forgettable at worst. And obviously that's only an average quality, so there's some really crap bosses in this game, but there's actually some really good ones. So it's gonna be a really interesting range for this list, and it's only 6 chapter bosses. And if you don't know what chapter bosses are, they're the bosses at the end of the chapter, aka the bosses that hold royal stickers. So there's only 6 bosses here, but again, we have a big range of them in quality wise, so it's gonna be an interesting list. But before we get started on this list, I'm still trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before summer break starts, so if you haven't hit that subscribe button, or you know a Mario RPG fan that isn't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it, but other than that, let's get started on this list. This boss is in my top 3 least favorite bosses in any of the Mario RPGs, and it turns out to be the final boss of the game. Oh boy, Bowser. Listen, I don't inherently hate the concepts in this fight. I think that there's unique things in here. The problem with it is that this boss fight has every single problem I have with a Sticker Star boss fight, but in way greater magnitude. Well, first off, the over-reliance on the Battle Spinner. Obviously, in other boss fights, you're gonna need the Battle Spinner. The more attacks you have, the merrier. But here, you actually need the more attacks. You need 2 or more to actually do adequate damage to Bowser. And that really is shown in the first phase where Bowser spawns a lot of enemies. You have to have more than 1 attack, because if you don't block the enemy pathways, then Bowser's just going to continuously spawn them in. And yes, you can use the power up to make sure that you absolutely get 2 attacks on the Battle Spinner. That's good, and I'm glad you can do that. The problem with this though is that you're wasting so many coins at that point, that there's just no point. It gets so much more expensive that you barely can even spend it anymore, which is not good. But that also relies on another question. I mean, you could just block the pathways. Why don't you just do that? Well, that kind of goes on to the second problem. The specific thing cards that you need. The problem with it is that you don't actually know what thing cards would actually work. I'll give you something though. You can use a stapler, and you can use tape. That's all I know though. Because there's so many thing cards in this game, and you have to think really creatively and out of the box. That also goes on to the phase with the lava bubbles. If you don't have an air conditioner or a refrigerator, you're just gonna struggle with that phase a decent amount. That's just not fun. That's just not good gameplay in my opinion. Also, the last phase before the huge giant Bowser, you have a chain chomp, and if you don't have a tail, then you cannot damage Bowser with the chain chomp. That's not good. But then we go into the second phase. The second phase is fine. I think that it goes on for too long until the actual third phase happens, but I mean, it's not terrible. The attacks are good, but I gotta say the music here, the second phase and the first phase, is not final boss requirement. It doesn't fit that criteria to me. I mean, you should compare it to stuff like In the Final or Dreamy Bowser from Dream Team. I mean, it just doesn't compare in my opinion. But does that mean that all parts of this boss fight is bad? Well, there is one part of the boss fight I enjoy. This is worth it. I enjoy this last phase so much. It's in my top 3 favorite chapter bosses from this game. I enjoy this last phase so much that it can stand alone as a chapter boss. If I split these 3 phases into different fights, it would have been enjoyable. It would have been a great fight. But sadly, the first 2 phases sink this part of the fight down so drastically. When I first replayed Sticker Star only 2 months ago, I wasn't able to get to this part of the fight. And it's because I just hated the first 2 phases. It was really hard to need specific thing cards. So I rage quit. But when I replayed this game for the channel, I got to this last phase and I started enjoying this final boss again. It has really fitting music and it's good final boss music. This fight has you do so much damage. You're buffed like crazy because of Kirsty, and you get 5 attacks at most. Bowser's attacks are also pretty threatening as well, but my favorite part about it is that you have the threat of running out of stickers. You are really close to running out of stickers in this fight. Like, you're really close, which is a really good threat, and I actually enjoy it here. because you're never actually going to run out, but you're just going to get really close, which is actually a good time in my opinion. This is what the final boss needed to be. I wish that the first two phases were just as good as this final phase. It's really sad that the first two phases sink this part all the way to the bottom, and it makes it one of my least favorite bosses in any Mario RPG, which is so disappointing because the third phase is so good, but the first two phases, they're just awful, and it sucks. This fight is from World 1, which means that World 1 basically rubbed all its boringness on this fight as well, because the Mega Sparkle Goomba is so boring. Nothing happens here. It's just such a bland and boring and forgettable fight. I fought this battle so many times. I fought this big Goomba so many times. I have to use the fan, and then I destroy the fight. That's it. There's nothing here. I mean, it doesn't even have interesting attacks. That's probably the worst part about it. There's nothing here. I mean, think about it. Look at other games, other Paper Mario games that have World 1s that are generic. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is Petalburg from the Thousand Year Door. I mean, Hooktail's a good fight. He has a good presence throughout the entire world, and he has some really enjoyable dialogue. My bad, she. I keep getting slandered in the comments for calling Hooktail a he, but she has some pretty good comments, stuff like smelling under her feet. That's weird, but it's funny, and that gives it more personality, more uniqueness. There's nothing here that makes this fight unique. I guess there's that funniness where all the Goombas leave except for the Royal Sticker Goomba, but that's it. Also, the only other interesting thing is that you can beat this fight without using the fan, and then Kirsty gives you some weird dialogue after you beat the fight, but that's it. That's the only thing here that's unique, and that's the only thing here I actually found out, but that's it. Nothing happens in the Mega Sparkle Goomba fight, and that's why it's at number 5. So the Tower Power Pokey fight isn't bad, but I do think that it's still barren. Even though it's not as barren as the Mega Sparkle Goomba fight, it's still pretty barren. Like, it's a close second compared to that fight. But the thing is that this fight has good attacks, and it has good music, which is like a good baseline. It's a good baseline for a fight. But the reason why it's still low is because you're forced to use a thing card here. In this case, the baseball bat. Obviously, it's not hard to find the baseball bat, but if you don't have it in your album, at best, you just have to go back to the shop that turns things into stickers, but at worst, you have to go back into the world trying to find that specific thing that you need. That's not good, and that's very unenjoyable. Obviously, I know that you need the baseball bat. I know that. Obviously, I played this game enough, and I watched enough about this game to know this. But if you don't know it, it's going to be very irritating. And if that does sound like a minor complaint, I mean, it is. It definitely is. These three fights, obviously, number 5 to number 3, are pretty close in quality. They're both, actually all three of them, are pretty forgettable and kind of boring. But I had to use these specific minor critiques that just separate them, and that is why the Tower Power Pokey fight is only at number 4. Out of the 3 fights that I keep mentioning, Mega Sparkle Goomba and Tower Power Pokey, this is probably the most enjoyable. This is the most fun, and obviously that makes it the best, why it's ranked the highest. But it also is the most forgettable out of the 3, and I don't even know why. Maybe it's because it's a slow fight, maybe it's because the final phase is just plain boring. I mean, those are both fair criticisms, but I gotta say, I really like the emphasis on fire damage here. I think it's a unique take for a boss fight. I also enjoy that you don't need to use thing cards here. You're not forced to. Obviously, it's better if you do, but you don't need to, which is really good, and I really enjoy that. But I just don't like how slow the fight is, and I don't like the last phase. There's really boring attacks there, and he still has 100 HP, which is a lot. Obviously, I do like the Giant Bowser attacks, and I like the HP and the fire damage, but it still only deserves to be number 3, not any higher. The Goober Blooper has really good music. I mean, that's all that really people remember from it. It just has really good music. I mean, it's a good thing that people remember that, because that's the main strength of the Goober Blooper fight. And the reason why it's so good is because not only does the music sound really good, I mean, obviously, other bosses have really good sounding music. So what makes this boss fight special? While other bosses just have really good music, this boss fight puts the music into the boss fight. Like, it has it integrated into the boss fight itself. Like, the beat is just made by the Gooper Blooper, and the music changes after every single attack. It gets more intense the stronger the attacks are, or the more times that he attacks, which is really good, and it makes the boss odd, but still a really enjoyable experience, which is nice. The reason why it's not number 1, though, is because you're forced to use a thing. You had to use the sponge here, which the first time I fought this fight, I couldn't do it. I tried to use the sponge, but I didn't time it right, so the sponge just went away, which is not good. The thing about it, though, is that if this fight didn't use a sponge, or a thing card in general, it probably would have been number 1, because of just such a unique experience with this boss fight. But because you had to use a thing card, and, I mean, once you actually power down the Gooper Blooper, the music isn't as good. That is why it's only at number 2. The number 1 is actually a really enjoyable experience from this game. Imagine this for a second. I'm extremely tired of World 5. I made a video about the world ranking, and you guys got to see how much I hated World 5. But I said one thing. I said one thing about World 5 that was really good, and that was PD Piranha. When I went through this whole world going through levels that I basically hated, I got to go to the end of the world to fight this boss. This boss fight is extremely simple. Yeah, it has simple attacks. It has a decent amount of health. There's no concept. There's no need to use thing stickers. This is what I needed after a really confusing world. I mean, there's really simple concepts. If you knock him over, then you can jump on him and do more damage. That works. He has really good attacks that are simple to dodge. That works. He has a lot of HP, but he doesn't have a lot of defense. That works. I think that everything in this boss fight works. I also enjoy the music here a lot. It's tied for me with Gooper Blooper. I'm not sure which one's better. Both of them are really good. I enjoy this fight so much, and again, it was a breath of fresh air, and what I needed to complete the game. If this fight was not in World 5, I probably would have rage quit every single time I played that world. Thank you guys for watching this video. My next video will be on either Origami King or Sticker Star. And if you lasted this long and you're not subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Again, I am still trying to do 1,000 subscribers, and 1 subscriber could mean the meaning if I got to 1,000 subscribers or 999. That was some great grammar right there. But I'd really appreciate if you subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.